welcome. You're watching Money9. I'm Sakshi, Batra, and this is Walletnomics, where we're going to focus on the Q3 GDP data. And to help us understand what this really means for the common man is policy researcher, economist Karan Bhasin. Good evening, Karan. Thank you very much for joining us on this very special show on Money9. I want to begin by understanding from you. Of course, we all know that the headlines have been quite happy about the 0.4% growth on the Q3 GDP data, as well as we've come out of technical recession too. But is it an encouraging data? I want to understand this because I did, see your tweet on the day when the GDP numbers came out, and you said that, you had expected much more. So is it a shocker for you, or is it still encouraging as far as the economy is concerned?
Well, I mean, it is encouraging as far as the economy is concerned. The reason I was shocked was because I expected the number positive, uh, and expected it to be better was because indicators did the same. And what we now know is that the GVA has been quite good, and it's the GDP numbers that haven't quite uh, grown or shown the kind of. I think a lot of it also has to do with the sort of of the government, in the sense that they did some existing stuff. So some of those factors are coming into play. But the reason why I think it is a positive sign, and the reason why people, especially our viewers, should be happy about these figures is because manufacturing managed to actually grow by 1.6% in Q3, 1.5 Q2. Similarly, electricity, gas, water supply, and other utilities managed to grow at 7.3% in Q3, whereas they contracted by 7.2% in Q2. The only concern, and it's not so much of a concern, but really, the essence of the present crisis is such that they can't be done much about it. But the only concern is on hospitality, trade, and that particular subsection where we continue to witness a contraction. Apart from that, broadly the economy has started to grow. And this growth is also reflected in the sort of granular details that we see in the data. One of the key things that I particularly was very happy about is to note that the public sector, other public expenditure, government 0.5% down in Q3. So that contraction has continued in Q1, Q2, and Q3. Yet, despite that contraction, the economy is recovering faster. And what this means is that the recovery is largely private sector led, which is important for viewers, because it's important for jobs to be back. It's important for our annual increments, our bonuses, incentives, and all of that stuff. That depends on private sector recovery. And this recovery so far has by the private sector.
You did talk about how the GVA number was better than the GDP number this time. Help our viewers understand what is the significance of GVA versus the GDP. What gives us a real picture of the economy growing on ground?
Well, GDP is obviously a better indicator, consideration, taxes, all that stuff. But when we are looking at the extent of value addition that's happening, I think that's where the gross value added becomes quite important. So when we are looking at GVA, we are seeing that what components of value addition is actually happening, and then of course the impact of taxes and subsidies gets added on, and that gives us a better perspective of uh, what the sort of say national income or domestic. Reason why it becomes important at this moment is very keen to see what is happening across different sectors in terms of the level of economic activity. When there was a pandemic, there was no value addition that happened for virtually 1 quarter, which was followed by gradual relaxation and normalization of economic activities in certain subsectors, and so on and so forth. So GVA becomes important, um, when we are looking at trying to better how the is different sectors.
Understand from you, from the pandemic perspective, of course, we had seen two consecutive quarters of degrowth, and which is why we called it technical recession. But with the GDP crawling back to growth path, I wanted to understand: is the worst behind us, and is the effect of the pandemic also done and dusted?
Even though everyone is calling it a technical recession, and I've also used that kind of do not, it was one because it's an academic for a late. But what you're asking is very important, and this you're spot on. And this data point is exactly what we need to say that the worst is behind us, and it will only get better from here. And the reason I say it is because the kind of contraction that we saw. In many ways, India front-loaded the economic cost by undertaking a very that's the first 2 quarters. Post
Okay.
that, what we are is a gradual normalization. Now, of course, we are
Right.
back to growth.
Right. I also wanted to point out, we've been reading all along that, there is a high expectation of the V-shaped recovery. So is the data in line with that V-shaped recovery? And what does the common man really understand from this V-shaped recovery? What does it mean for them in their lives?
So for people to understand what a V-shaped recovery means is basically that when there's a very sharp reduction in growth, say for 1 or 2 quarters, and then eventually it gets back. So what we see in the data is that we see a V which gets formed, and that's why we call it a V-shaped recovery. Similarly, there are times when there's a prolonged U where you're stuck in the bottom for a time, and then it gets back up. And then there's WK, and you can name any alphabet that you can see on the graph. What a V-shaped recovery really means for most of our viewers is that basically your increments, your salary normalized a lot quicker than what was originally anticipated. Sign for those who are wondering that what is going to happen to my increment. Will my income go back to the previous pre-pandemic levels in the next quarter? All of those things happen within this is a significant achievement itself. Answer your first question that will shape recovery. My sense is that data at present does support the fact that it is a V-shaped recovery. So I think it's time that we accept the data as it is, and just agree that okay, it is a V-shaped recovery.
Okay, and what does the data also indicate about the consumption? Remember, like we have been talking about how the recovery prospects critically hinge on the uptick in the private consumption space. What have you seen there and read there in the details and the fine print?
Well, so private final consumption expenditure is up, which is great. People are back to spending discretionary back, and this trend is going to strengthen over the Q4 numbers whenever they are sort of released. Uh, the issue on the consumption front is that government consumption was still contracting in Q3. And because of that, we need to keep in mind that till the time government consumption does not go back to positive, there will be slight how much of support government's expenditure on infrastructure and capex has gone up. So that's again an offsetting factor. My sense is that consumption led growth is exactly what is pushing GST collections up and getting the economy back on track, and a lot of it is actually private sector led. So I see it as a positive trend which shows the robustness in our recovery process. At the end of the day, we need to understand that we don't want to recover and go back to 2019 levels. That's a significant. We want to grow beyond that, and the growth we aspire for is not 3-4%, but it is around 6-7%. 7.5%. That's the aspirational growth that people of the country want. So the recovery process now, from being positive to getting back to 7 or maybe even 6, that will be led by this private sector. So private sector consumption is a very in that sense.
Much, Karan. I have to stop. Of course, very interesting points made by you, and I would have loved to continue the discussion, but I think there is some technical issues that we are facing with respect to the internet connectivity. We'll try and fix that and maybe connect with you again so that we can discuss this topic in a much wider way. But I've understood that you've pointed out that the data is encouraging, with the fact that one can really pick up from this data that the private consumption is improving. There is green shoots in the economy that we are seeing. So in that respect, definitely the data is encouraging. Thank you very much for putting all these points in front of our viewers to be able to understand what this really data has for all of us in our daily lives, and what kind of an impact will this have on the overall economy as well. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Stay tuned with us on Money9 for lots more coming up.